I just heard this voice in my head. And it said, "She's not coming home."
We decided that we were going to go out and start searching. That was horrible.
They found that the glass had been broken from the outside in. There was blood on the side of the car. They figured that whatever happened to her started there.
On the night of May 26, 1995, 22-year-old Tracey Brazzel went out with two of her friends to have a fun night at Kodiak Ron's pub in Everett, Washington. While her friends left after drinks, Tracey stayed back at the arcade to finish her game. But that was the last time they ever heard from her. Despite everything her family did to find her, no sign of Tracey ever emerged. 2 months after Tracey's disappearance, 26-year-old Patricia "Patty" Berry was reported missing around the same location and in similar circumstances. 8 days later, her lifeless body was found in the woods, leaving her family devastated. What could have happened to Tracey Brazzel and Patricia Berry? Were both events connected? Hi, and welcome back to Mysterious Hook Friends. Today we are looking at the disturbing case of Patty Berry and Tracey Brazzel. Everett is the largest city in Snohomish County, Washington, with a population of over 110,000 people. It is a place known for saltwater beaches, rolling hills, and river deltas, making it a beautiful spot to unwind in nature. Unfortunately for two young women and their families, this lovely town was the backdrop to tragedy and years of grief. Tracey Brazzel was born on January 29, 1973, to Bill and Peggy Brazzel in Glen Ridge, New Jersey. Tracey had an older sister, Lisa, whom she loved and emulated a lot as a child. Tracey had a contagious smile, enjoyed reading books, and was eager to learn from a very early age. In 1986, when Tracey was 13 years old, her parents Bill and Peggy started having issues that led to their divorce. Peggy got custody of the girls and decided to move closer to her family in Snohomish County, Washington. They relocated when Tracey and Lisa were 16 and 19 years old, respectively. Bill loved his children and kept in touch with them at Snohomish, despite being separated from his wife and living in New Jersey. Tracey and Lisa continued their education in Snohomish County. Tracey wanted to go to cosmetology school, and even though she was still in her junior year, she worked hard to earn credits. At cosmetology school, Tracey's bright personality made her popular with her classmates, but her best friend was Alana, popularly called Lonnie. Once school was over, Tracey got a job at Great Clips Hair Salon at Mill Creek. At the time, she was already in her early 20s and living independently at Keeler's Corner Apartments in Linwood. Even though Tracey had moved out, she kept in touch with her mother and sister. She would call her mother every day and also called her sister frequently. She maintained her close relationship with Alana, often going out to lunch together. In May 1995, Tracey sent a letter to her family, revealing that she wanted to change certain things about her life. She also enclosed a picture of herself wearing a business suit. Soon after Lisa and Peggy got Tracey's letter, her father Bill visited from New Jersey to check on her. Bill observed that Tracey had chosen to dye her hair platinum blonde. He also learned she was encountering difficulties with a coworker at her workplace. Tracey was growing increasingly discontent with the very place she once envisioned as her dream job, and these sudden changes in his daughter's behavior left Bill feeling unsettled. Peggy did not notice anything unusual at the time. She was busy preparing for an overseas vacation with her mother. On May 25, 1995, before going to the airport for their trip, Tracey's mother and grandmother stopped by her workplace to see her. A day later, on May 26, 1995, Tracey quit her job unexpectedly. Although the reasons were unclear, Tracey seemed happy about quitting her job and decided to celebrate at night with some friends. Her best friend Alana was out of the country at the time, but Tracey had made plans to meet her when she returned. She went out for drinks with her friends Dina and David Conlon, who were siblings. They ended the night at Kodiak Ron's pub, along Highway 99, where Tracey immersed herself in arcade games. As the clock inched past 1 a.m., Tracey told David and Dina not to wait for her as she wanted to finish her game. Her friends said their goodbyes and left shortly. It wasn't until 1:45 a.m. that Tracey finally left the pub alone. On May 30th, 1995, Alana got back from her trip and started calling Tracey to meet up for their planned lunch, but all her calls went unanswered. She left messages but could not get through to Tracey. Feeling anxious, Alana decided to go to Tracey's apartment to check on her. The front door was locked, and despite repeated knocking, Alana got no response. She eventually gave up and was about to leave when she noticed something that got her more bothered. It was Tracey's car, a white Ford Probe parked peculiarly on the side of the street instead of its usual spot inside of the apartment complex. Alana moved closer to the car, only to make another disturbing discovery. The passenger side window was broken, but there was no glass pieces or shards inside the car. Immediately, Alana called Tracey's mother, Peggy, but her line was not reachable when she was vacationing overseas. Alana called another family member about her worries, and together they visited the apartment and checked out Tracey's car. But without any sign of foul play, they assumed Tracey would be back soon and would get in touch when she saw Alana's messages. No one reported Tracey missing because her mother, who normally spoke to her every day, was out of the country and unreachable, and her co-workers at the hair salon were not expecting her since she quit her job. On June 4th, 1995, Peggy's cruise ship docked in Montreal, and her phone was working again. When she called home, Peggy got the devastating news that her youngest daughter was missing. She dashed home in a panic, and with Lisa's help filed a missing persons report. By then, 8 days had already passed since Tracey was last seen at the pub. The Snohomish Police Department swung into action looking for Tracey. They went to Linwood to examine her apartment and her parked Ford. The police checked for fingerprints inside the car, but found nothing, not even Tracey's prints. It seemed as if someone had wiped the car clean. Not even the shattered glass from the window was found, except for a few tiny fragments on the back seat. The investigators could not get any useful leads, and the police department at the time also lacked funding to do anything significant with the bits of evidence collected from the car. The investigation was at a dead end. But Peggy could not sit back and wait for the police department to be funded. She contacted her friend, Andy, a former police officer. He worked with the police officers in charge of the case and helped them analyze some of the evidence. Eventually, one solid piece of evidence emerged: a single drop of blood found on Tracey's car window. Unfortunately, there was no technology advanced enough to test the blood at the time. Once again, they had hit a dead end. And while the search for Tracey was going on, another young woman in the city went missing. Patricia Berry, popularly known as Patty, was born on February 10, 1969. Although no details about her childhood are known, Patty was a single mother working to support her 2-year-old daughter, Jessica, when she disappeared. In 1995, Patty took up work at a dancer at Honey's nightclub, located along Highway 99. She didn't really like her job because she didn't think it was decent enough, but the pay was good and she needed money to complete her education and provide for Jessica. Patty told her mother, Nancy Strensrud, that once she was done with school, she would get a proper job she could be proud of. With her job as a nighttime dancer, Patty would leave her toddler with a babysitter in the evening and fetch her after she got off work in the morning. But on July 31, 1995, Patty did not show up at the babysitter's house. The babysitter called Nancy, Patty's mother, who immediately felt worried.
I was called by her babysitter, and she said she had not come home. I thought that very strange. So I just said, well, I'll be up there in a few minutes then and pick up the baby. I started calling, some of her friends and stuff. Nobody had heard from her. So my concern was growing at that point. Patty was a very, very good mom. She would never not come home to her baby.
Everyone knew how important Jessica was to Patty, and it was unthinkable that Patty had simply forgotten to pick up her daughter.
Mom called and said that Patty was missing. Had we heard from her? And I said, no, we haven't heard from her. Something had to be wrong because she would not come home for Jess.
They contacted every hospital in the area and the county morgue to see if anyone matching Patty's description had been brought in.
At the time, my husband worked at the medical examiner's office, so he called down there to see if anybody had been brought in, and it was a no every time.
Nancy finally called the police and reported Patty as missing. Instead of waiting for the police to take action, the whole family went out in search of Patty. The police sensed the urgency and immediately put out an all-points bulletin without waiting for 48 hours to pass.
I didn't like it, and it's not a good lifestyle, but they do it because of the money.
She was working at a place called Honey's. She was supposed to pick up her daughter from her babysitter the next morning by 9 o'clock at the latest. She didn't show up.
He decided that he would go ahead and put an APB out on her, which was very unusual because they usually wait 24, 48 hours.
The investigators found that Patty had gotten off work around 1:30 a.m. on July 31st, 1995. The bouncer on the shift that night at Honey's told investigators that he had walked Patty to her car and noticed she had a flat tire. Someone procured a fix-a-flat inflator, but it only got the faulty tire half inflated. Still, it was enough to carry her to the nearest gas station where she could fix the tire. With that information, the investigators traced the route they thought Patty would have taken and found a gas station. But a note taped on the air machine at the gas station said the machine was inoperable. This meant that Patty would have been unable to fill her tire there. While the investigators were out interviewing the people at the nightclub, Patty's family was also searching for her, and they would be the ones to stumble on the next important lead. They found Patty's missing car close to a car wash behind a convenience store in South Everett, parked away from sight. They did not touch the car for fear of ruining evidence, but upon peeking inside, they saw a disturbing sight and immediately called the police. The car's interiors were covered in a massive amount of blood. This was no longer a missing persons case, but something much worse.
It just never got any better. You have a few seconds where everything's fine, and then you realize what has happened. And it's like being kicked very hard. I thought my daughter is dead.
When the police examined the scene, they concluded that someone wanted to conceal Patty's car from sight. They also noticed that the car wash offered air filling facilities, so Patty might have stopped there to fix the tire the night she disappeared. There were drops of blood on the exterior of the car, indicating that Patty was probably attacked when she was trying to fix her flat tire. The massive amount of blood in the interior meant that the attack had continued inside the car.
Copious amounts of blood. The front driver's seat is heavily blood spattered. The rear seat, and particularly the
floor in the rear seat is just a large pool of blood. It's obvious at this point that we are no longer in a missing persons case.
The police searched the surrounding area and found items that belonged to Patty.
He found several items that were Patty's. There was a pair of jeans that had blood on them. Her bag that she had been seen leaving the club with, her dance costumes. There was additional blood evidence on those items.
With a sinking feeling, investigators understood that something bad had happened to Patty.
This is a homicide.
On August 8, 1995, 8 days after Patty had gone missing, 2 kids playing in the wooded area just south of Everett Mall saw something so gruesome, they went shrieking and running to the adults. Police arrived to find the lifeless body of Patty Berry, nude from the waist down and bearing 18 stab wounds. Although Patty's family feared she was attacked, the news of her death confirmed their worst fear. According to the autopsy, Patty's killer possibly intended to molest her, and due to the location where her body was found, investigators believe that the killer was someone familiar with the area.
It was a real bloody, gruesome crime scene. Very, very violent attack.
To have your child die is unbelievable. To have one murdered, it just makes it so much worse.
A horrible feeling. It was horrible.
The investigators went back to Honey's to retrieve surveillance footage from the night Patty left the club. Unfortunately, the footage was blank from beginning to end, which made the club owners look suspicious. It seemed the club owners were trying to hide something, but as much as the investigators wanted to handcuff them, there was no evidence tying them to the crime scene.
The thought was that the club destroyed the video. Their position is that they don't cooperate with law enforcement.
Soon after, investigators got a call from a patron, Leslie James, who claimed he had information on Patty. James said he was at Honey's from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. and had spent about 20 minutes chatting with Patty. After leaving Honey's, he drove to a casino 20 miles away, and on his way back later that night, he claimed he saw Patty trying to inflate her tire at a gas station. This was the same gas station with the malfunctioning pump. The police believed James's story at first because they assumed that Patty had indeed visited the gas station. But James kept changing his story every time the police talked to him, making confusing and suspicious statements. The police put him on top of the suspect list and interrogated him thoroughly. However, there was no evidence to link James to the murder, so the police let him go. As the investigation stalled and police struggled to find a way forward, Nancy forged her own path. She contacted Scott North, a reporter for the Daily Herald, to keep Patty's story alive in the press.
I have to do something, and it has to count. I just thought, Patty, I want you to know that we never gave up.
Nancy Stensrud was in hell. The questions haunted her. She wanted so desperately to find out who took her daughter's life that it was an obsession. Nancy loved her daughter, and so I always saw it from day one. It was a story about love, a mother's love for their child.
He kept Patty alive in the paper, honestly, and I appreciate that so much.
Scott published touching articles about Patty that eventually generated a good lead. A new witness connected the police about something he had seen the night Patty disappeared. The witness recounted seeing a man washing off bloodstains at the car wash where Patty's car had been found. He said he remembered the date vividly. It was his sister's birthday, but he never reported the incident, assuming it was animal blood on the car. The witness was asked to describe the man he saw at the car wash, and a composite sketch of the suspect was created. The police released the sketch to the public with hopes for a breakthrough, but no one came forward to identify the man. The case soon went cold after this, much to the disappointment of Patty's family.
Do I have to get up every morning and feel this way?
Months turned into years, and almost a decade later, in February 2005, the case was reopened by Snohomish County cold case detectives Jim Scharf and David Heitzman. By that time, forensic technology had advanced enough to make something out of the evidence gathered in Patty's car. Investigators believed that the suspect attacked Patty at the car wash.
We're sure that the suspect killed her, drove her in her car, dumped her body, and drove her car back and dropped it off.
They decided to focus on the steering wheel.
Thought it was an excellent item of evidence to submit, to try to get DNA from.
And sent it to the Washington State Crime Lab for analysis. Most of the DNA on the wheel was Patty's, but one ray of hope shone through. Also present on the steering wheel was the DNA of an unidentified male.
There was a DNA profile of a male mixed with the DNA of Patty Berry that was on the steering wheel. I was really excited. I thought, now this case can be solved.
The newly extracted DNA profile was submitted to the Combined DNA Index System, and in 2008, it provided the long-awaited answer. Investigators zeroed in on a match with a known offender who was already in custody, serving time. A repeat offender named Danny Giles. "40-year-old Danny Giles had a long list of offenses on police record, but his DNA was only recently submitted to COITAS after a conviction for indecent exposure. He was a registered molester who was convicted of attempted abuse. His entire adult life had been spent going in and out of prison, starting with an abuse conviction in 1987. Throughout Giles' time in jail, he refused to be managed by psychologists and never participated in any treatment. He was described as psychopathic and posed a threat to women. According to Giles' ex-fiancée, he derived pleasure in threatening her with a knife. One of Giles' cellmates revealed that Giles admired the serial killer Gary Ridgway, popularly known by the moniker Green River Killer, for the number of lives he had claimed. But even the DNA evidence and Giles' criminal history were insufficient to charge him for Patty's murder. The DNA evidence only confirmed that Giles had been present in Patty's car, not that he had taken her life.
What the DNA told us at the time was his hands had been on her steering wheel. That doesn't tell us he killed her. Now we need to see, well, can we connect him in any other fashion to Patty Berry?
The investigators started to piece the puzzle together and build a case against Giles. They compared the composite sketch of the suspect to Giles' picture and were astonished by the stark resemblance.
It was eerie how closely the composite matched photographs of Giles from that time. He had the same haircut, same mustache. It's startling, the resemblance. I'm not sure I've ever seen a composite that was that spot on.
They dug through records and discovered that Giles lived in the area where Patty's body had been dumped and was working for a local landscaping company at the time she was killed. But even with all this, they needed Giles to either confess to the crime or deny he was in Patty's car. Detective Jim Scharf researched Giles before meeting with him at the prison. He approached him as if seeking his help on Patty Berry's case, since Giles had lived and worked in the area. Giles said he had heard about Patty's death on TV, but didn't know anything else. He also denied ever being inside Patty's car and said he was unfamiliar with the area where the body was found.
He denied knowing Patty or ever being in her car. We knew that we could prove that he was lying to us. I was just eating it all up.
One of the most damning things that Giles said is that he'd never, ever been to that lot where her body had been found. He'd worked on a landscaping crew. Dan Giles had been at that location once a week for about 3 months.
It was clear that Giles was telling lies. Detective Scharf knew that Giles would routinely visit the woods near Everett Mall to dump grass clippings from his landscaping workplace, the same woods where Patty's body had been found. To make Giles confess, Scharf showed him the DNA evidence that proved he was present in Patty's car.
He was taken back by that. I'm telling him that his DNA wouldn't be there unless he was the person that killed Patty. You could see that he was backed into a corner and he was nervous.
Despite being concerned, Giles staunchly refused to confess to the murder. But the detectives now had enough evidence to charge Giles with Patty's murder, so they did not waste time trying to get a confession. Since reopening Patty's cold case, the investigators had suspected that Tracey's disappearance and Patty's murder were linked. Both were young women who disappeared just months apart along Highway 99 late at night. In both cases, their car had been found abandoned, with clear signs that someone had attempted to clean away all traces and fingerprints. While Tracey's body was never found, investigators were certain she too had lost her life to Giles. The investigators again took advantage of advanced forensic technology to crack Tracey's case. They sent a single drop of blood found on Tracey's car window for analysis and were able to extract DNA from it. This DNA also matched Giles' blood, proving that he had been present in Tracey's car as well. However, just as in Patty's case, Giles refused to confess or share any details about what happened to Tracey, but the detectives went ahead and charged him for Tracey's murder. On November 14, 2012, Giles was charged with the murder of Patty Berry and put to trial in Snohomish County Superior Court. After years of pain and loss, Patty's family could finally hope to get justice. Giles was also charged with Tracey's murder, but the prosecutors faced the problem of convicting him without having found Tracey's body. Because of that, Tracey's case was dropped and Patty's case was pursued.
I felt it was probably a better way to go because they had stronger evidence in Patty's case, especially with the body.
After days of hearing Snohomish County Superior Court, Judge Bruce Weiss found Giles guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced him to 47.5 years in prison.
I remember looking at him, and I just thought to myself, how can you stab someone 19 times and not have any feeling?
He had on his suit and had his hair cut, but he still had the presence of being a monster.
The sentencing brought great relief to Patty's family, especially her daughter, Jessica, who was then in her 20s. She said Giles was the reason she did not get to know her mother and demanded that he be taken away.
Oh my gosh. I was ecstatic. It's over. He's been found guilty, thank God. And I had the biggest cry I've had in years.
Tracey's family tried to persuade Giles to divulge the location of Tracey's body, assuring him they had no interest in having him serve more time in jail. They only wanted to give their daughter a befitting burial. However, Giles remained silent all these years. Detective Sharp worked with a psychic in Tracey's case, who said Tracey was dead and her body was dumped in a shaft somewhere. Detective Sharp believed her body was somewhere near the area where her car was found, but the exact location continued to evade the police.
We finally got a conviction, but at the same point, a little bit of guilt that Tracey's family doesn't get any of that. They are still living that nightmare.
I just want to bring her back here where she can be buried and we can feel the peace.
The sentencing of Danny Giles brought relief to Patty's family and also gave hope to Tracey's family that maybe one day they would have the opportunity to give Tracey a befitting burial. The story of Danny Giles only shows how certain offenders should not be carelessly released into society. Giles murdered Tracey and Patty during an 8-month period when he was on the run from authorities for second-degree theft. What do you think should be done to offenders like Giles? How best do you think they should be handled so they do not pose a threat to society? Share your thoughts in the comments section, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this.
I loved watching her car come down the driveway because I knew she was going to step out. We were going to have coffee or we were going to talk. I just miss her. I've always wanted to know, why didn't you ask her if she had a family that loved her? Why did you have to kill her?